Welcome back to another episode of the Know Your Power podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Aaliyah.
And I'm Julia Renee.
And today we are talking about binge eating disorder.
Yay.
I feel like trigger warning up front, obviously you could tell by the title, by what we're talking about. If you know that some of this might trigger you, I would completely avoid this video in general because we are in general talking about the positive coming out of it, recovery, stuff like that.
Like actual tactical things that you can do and that we have done in order to heal.
Yeah. But we are still sharing our story and talking about some sensitive topics. So just tread lightly if this is something that could potentially bother you. We're sharing more of like the positives and the tips in the beginning and the end, kind of sharing our stories in the middle. So if that helps you navigate, do what you need to do. I want to define it first. So the definition is characterized by recurrent episodes of eating large quantities of food, often very quickly and to the point of discomfort, a feeling of a loss of control during the binge, experiencing shame, distress, or guilt afterwards, and not regularly using, I copied and pasted this, but that is not grammatically correct. Basically using unhealthy compensation measures, e.g. purging, to counter the binge eating.
Yeah.
So basically it's having really intense binging. I feel like overeating is something a lot of people do. Yeah. I feel like overeating and having binge eating disorder are not necessarily the same thing.
Correct.
It's when it is extreme, when it's reoccurring very regularly, and when you do have those negative repercussions afterwards is when it can develop into binge eating.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people think since they overeat that they have a binge eating disorder, and they're very, very different. And all of us have overeaten before, like all of us have totally done that, but binge eating is completely different to where like it becomes a habit of eating copious amounts of food over and over. Like it'll happen like sometimes every single day.
Yeah. I've had it happen like more than once in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have that uncomfortable feeling, and that pattern just happens over and over and over again. And that's more so what it is versus just I overate on a night out. You know, we've all done that before. So.
And obviously we're not doctors. So if you want to do your own research, I always recommend that. Also like talking to a professional, getting diagnosed, that can really get you like the best help in that sense.
Yeah. We're really just sharing things that have worked for us, some resources, because we get asked about it a lot as two people that have struggled with it in the past and have taken necessary steps, gotten the help that we needed, and come out the other side. So we're just here to show you that it is possible, because sometimes when you're dealing with a binge eating disorder, you feel like there's no end in sight, and you feel like you're the only one who struggles with this, and you feel very lonely. There's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame, and you don't want to share it with anybody, let alone like your partners or anything, or a therapist or somebody, because it can be quote unquote like you think it's embarrassing. Because one thing that I noticed about binge eating is that it's not talked about as much as maybe a disorder where you're not eating enough food, because people don't realize that it can be just as damaging to eat in excess as it can to eat under.
I think when you hear eating disorder, you have a certain like image in your mind of what that person looks like or what they're going through. A lot of people can binge and purge and their weight can stay the exact same, and it goes not undiagnosed, but like undetected to someone who doesn't know mentally what you're going through. Or you might be a healthy weight. Like we'll talk about our stories a little later, but like I know for both of us, it has happened like post-show and we're returning to a healthy weight. So the people around us are like, oh, she's healthy again. When in reality, I'm like at my most unhealthy relationship with food.
Very good point. Binge eating, it doesn't matter what your size is. It doesn't matter how much you weigh. It doesn't matter how fit you look or how not fit you look or whatever. It doesn't matter. Because it could be anybody. Like I'm a part of a Facebook group, and this is part of the resources that I'll give you guys today. It's an incredible Facebook group. And all of these girls are literally from all walks of life. And there was one girl on it that was I related to her so much because she was a trainer and she struggled with it. And one of the things that she was talking about was that she feels like a fraud with her clients. And I was literally talking about this subject with my one-on-one coaching clients because we have a Monday mindset call. And I felt that same way, that I'm supposed to be this healthy person and I'm supposed to have it all figured out and know what to do and what not to do, but I struggle with binge eating. Why would anyone listen to me? And I related to her so much, and that's just proof that it doesn't matter where you are in life, what you look like, what your background, nothing. This can affect you at any time. And if that's you, we got you.
Yeah. We are here for you.
Yeah.
We have been there. We have been in your shoes.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about like the animal brain versus the human brain. I feel like you're better at speaking on this, if I'm being honest. So if you want to go into what the difference is and how that affects.
Yeah. So for me, what helped me when I first realized that this was an actual problem, because I had been struggling for such a long time and I didn't quite know why I felt like I couldn't control myself. And then that's when I looked up, like, I don't think I looked up binge eating disorder. I think I just like looked up like the pattern that I kept doing. And then I read the definition of what a binge eating disorder was. And I was like, oh my God, I've been struggling with that for years and I had no idea. And then went to do some research on like books and resources.
I feel like we read the same book. And I think I read that book because you recommended that book on your story once.
Yeah. So this book that I learned this from was Brain Over Binge by Katherine Hansen. It's been by far the most incredible book for me personally, because first half of it explains her story. So you get to relate to this amazing woman and how she struggled with it, how she got through it, like for years. And you see that like personal side of it. And then the other half of the book is logical. So how did she actually get through it? It's not like, one thing that I hear people say a lot with people who struggle with binge eating disorder is that people don't understand, because they'll say to you, just stop eating. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay. Like,
that's like saying to a depressed person, like, just be happy.
Just be happy.
Oh, totally didn't think of that one, dude.
I didn't think of that. That's a great idea. Let me try that. So reading this second part of the book where she goes over the logical brain and how our brain actually works when it's like addicted to a certain thing, it made so much more sense to me, and it made me feel so much better. And it made me feel so much better because now I had an explanation to why my brain and me acted this way versus thinking that there was something wrong with me and that I was the problem.
I read the same book and that one helped. That was my initial like push of help. It helps with anything you're going through to fully rationally think about it, because when you're going through it, it's hard to like kind of get that bird's eye perspective of why is this happening? Like, what can I do to help, whatever. And I think learning to almost place blame on the animalistic brain, the brain I actually don't have control over, instead of blaming my present self, helped kind of separate the two feelings.
Exactly. And we'll kind of go into that. So basically, the definition of like your animal brain, this is the oldest part of our brain. It's automatic and it's unthinking. So for example, I always like to think back to like caveman times where you needed to eat and you went out and hunt and that was what we did. So we just go and do it.
Yeah. And then the animal you bring back, you eat all of it, like as much as you can, because you don't know the next time you're going to hunt.
Exactly. You don't know because you got to store it for winter. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then the human brain, this is our more conscious brain. It's the newer part. It's more developed. And this is the actual part of your brain that makes decisions. This is the part of you that doesn't want to binge. Like, it's your true self. And you know that this isn't a pattern that you want to have, versus the animal brain. It's just like, we binge every Friday. Yeah. And that's what we've been doing for years. So we just do it. Yeah. So when you think about it, our brain is doing its job. Our brain's job is to find patterns. And just like when you wake up in the morning and you automatically go and make your cup of coffee, or you drive to work without even thinking about it, our brain is helping us by doing that, because it is saying, oh, well, we always go and do this thing at this time.
Yeah.
So let's make it easy for her, and let's make it habitual to where she can drive to work and she don't even know how she got there.
Yep.
We all have that one thing that we're just, oh my God, I just do it and I don't know how.
I tend to like disassociate a lot and get into that like mindset of, I don't remember doing this. I don't remember doing that. Or like I'll literally be in the moment and be like, I'm not like fully present right now. And I did experience that every single time I would binge. And it was like my human brain was the one like kind of whispering in the back that was like, you shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. You should feel guilty about this. Like you need to stop this pattern. And I was like totally in the background to the point where I wouldn't even acknowledge it. Yeah. I just felt those feelings while going through the motions of binging. It's
almost like what happens is that animal part of your brain that's automatic and unthinking that goes and binges starts getting pushed to the forefront of your brain, and it takes over everything. And then your human brain goes straight to the back and is, like you said, whispering back there, but you can't hear it. Yeah. That's what it feels like. And that's why that feeling of uncontrollability happens, because you have made a pattern or a habit of this. And the way that I personally was able to stop this pattern was learning about neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is really just the brain's ability to rewire itself. So you don't have to be stuck in this pattern, because you're in charge of your brain. You can tell it to do a different habit.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult. So basically, since we can rewire our brain, this is the way that I like to think about it. So imagine you've never binged before and you binge one time. Right now, if you're listening to the podcast, just visualize this. So thinking about two strings that are trying to attach themselves. So every time that you binge, the string gets closer together. You binge a second time, the string gets closer together. Those are basically like neurons in your brain that are attaching themselves and making that habit a habit, so that when you go and do it, it just makes it easier. So you've binged 5 times, they get closer, it's closer, until it's wired in your brain. The strings are attached, it's a straight line, and now you just automatically go and do that thing.
It's part of your routine now.
Just like those wires can fire together, you can pull them apart. But it takes doing
it's harder.
It's harder. It takes doing the opposite reaction. So instead of immediately reacting to the urge to binge, you take a moment to pause. Those wires start pulling apart. Pulling apart. And the more that you do that, the further away that those neurons get. And that's how healing starts to happen. But you actually have to make a different decision from what you normally do. Because your first reaction would be, oh my God, I'm having an urge to binge and I'm just going to go and do it. But instead, to get those neurons to kind of like start disconnecting, basically, I have an urge to binge. Okay, let me take a moment and use one of my practices that Julia and Kendall taught me instead. And then maybe you don't do it that time. You're getting better each time that you don't do it. And eventually it gets easier and it gets easier. It gets easier. It's just like going to the gym. When you first started going to the gym, it was such a pain to get yourself to go and do it. And it was challenging and it was hard. You go and do it and you're like, okay. And then now you can't imagine your life without going to the gym.
Yeah. The same way you can form positive habits, you can form negative. And you can always break the cycle. It takes a long time. I think like it's been years now since I would say I had my last like full on binge eating disorder episode. And I still I feel like congratulate myself on certain things that I do today. Like it's an ever evolving change once you're getting out of it.
And that's the thing about personal development, is I think that people think once they start working on themselves that all of these things are going to completely disappear. And I don't really believe that's the case. I think you just get better at managing them, because I still have these episodes where I feel the need to binge. It literally happened last night. And previously I would have just said, I have an urge to binge. I'm going to order DoorDash and I'm going to order all this stuff and I'm going to binge. That's what would have happened. But with these practices of constantly saying, this time I'm not going to do it. This time I'm not going to do it. This time I'm not going to do it. Now, when it happens, I don't have freakouts, panic attacks. I don't have massive anxiety, and I do my practices, and then eventually it goes away.
Yeah.
So it didn't, and this doesn't say that it's not, the urges aren't going to completely go away ever.
Yeah.
But it gets so much better.
Yeah. Like, it's easier to navigate them. Yeah, for sure. I want to go a little backtrack into like our stories with it, and then we'll go back to like our full on tips of what helped us pull out of that mindset. Yeah. So just to share like a little bit, again, we did a full episode on this where we went super in depth into like our history with binge eating and like all of that. So I'm just gonna go through it, not quite as detailed. We can link that episode down below. It was one of our first episodes ever, which is crazy. Yeah. Which is why I think we need to revisit it, because there's definitely some new listeners now. When I definitely noticed I had tendencies like all through my childhood with binge eating. My family would call it like closet eating. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Yeah, I have. Where basically like once everyone would go to sleep, I would go eat. Yes. Or I would like quickly grab a snack, bring it back to my room, like eat it behind closed doors, and always feel a weird sense of guilt around eating. Yes. That was like a lot of my growing up, my childhood. I was always in really, really competitive sports. A lot of them did matter how I looked. Yes. I did gymnastics, I did figure skating, I did diving. All of those, you have to be very thin to perform well in the eyes of my parents and coaches and stuff like that. So food was always touchy for me in general, but I don't think I would have classified what I was doing as BED until after my last bodybuilding show, which is like weirdly recent. Like that was 2 years ago at this point. And that's when I was noticing like the actual like extreme overeating, it happening very regularly, like daily basis at that point, feeling very out of my control, having a lot of that like shame and guilt around it. I always did have like a little guilt around eating, but never to that extent, never to the extent where like what you said, I couldn't even tell the people around me because I was like embarrassed about it. Yeah. And like I had heard what binge eating was from you, which is crazy, and like still didn't tell you. This seems to be like a common theme when Kendall's going through stuff. I need to just tell Julia, which I've been good, just so you know. But I had seen from Julia, she was like the only public figure person I followed that actually talked about it, which I appreciate. And like, that's why I think I want to talk about it now to like help maybe the people that follow me that don't know how to classify this. I didn't know what to call it until like I saw you speak on it, and I was like, that is exactly what I'm going through now. Like I knew what it was, but when you don't experience it, you can't like put words to how you're feeling. You're like, I just can't stop eating. Like that's what it feels like. Like I can't stop, and then I feel bad about it, but I still don't stop, and I continue that cycle. So that's when it got really bad, was after a show for me. And I feel like that's really, really common for competitors. It
is. And that's the thing is, it really is, men and women, and nobody talks about it. I've gotten so many messages from competitors and non-competitors, male and female, that really struggle with it.
I'm just sweating, so I'm taking this off.
Yeah, but for you, what do the episodes usually look like? Like, how did you really feel after that?
So I was similar, first off, with DoorDash. And one of my tips was uninstalling some of the apps for sure. I was like, I was post-show, and I thought I had a handle on things. I thought I was doing a good reverse diet at first. And then after like a few weeks, I think I was like, I can be more flexible. So I introduced like maybe some things I had been craving, even if it was like chocolate rice cakes, like something deemed as like fairly healthy. Some people eat them while in a cut, like whatever.
I'm eating them right now.
Exactly. And I would bring them home and eat the whole thing within like a minute. Or like a big thing for me is I wouldn't even make it home. I a lot of times would go into a grocery store, grab takeout, whatever it was, sit in my car, eat it, not even like be conscious of the fact I ate it. And then I would kind of like come to.
And you're like, it's gone. Yeah. Oh my God.
And then I would sit in my car for another like hour or two, just feeling terrible, feeling like guilt about it, shame about it, sitting there being like, I can't believe I just did that. And then almost those like guilty feelings were like, well, like the only thing I'm taking comfort in is food. So then I would repeat that again and again and again. Yes. So that was like a really big thing for me, was like feeling like I couldn't even like grab the food I'm getting and go home with it. Yes. Like I felt like it was so ravenous that I was like on the spot. And I do think like we've talked about hunger cues being a little broken feeling after a really long cut or a bodybuilding show, because you really are getting unhealthy and borderline starving yourself for a minute there. So it's once you get food in your system again, that animal side of your brain is like, we need to latch on to this.
We need this. We haven't had this for such a long time. And it's hard because you start disconnecting so far from your hunger cues.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We start doing that at such a young age with so many different things, whether it's when we're young and our parents tell us, clear your plate. That's disconnecting us from our hunger cues, because it could be forcing us to eat more food than we actually need. And then there's also where there's parents that comment about how much you're eating to where you're hungry and your parents say, don't eat that. Stop eating. That's also disconnecting us from our hunger cues. And I love that you mentioned that earlier too, because even though you said that you didn't struggle with binge eating until like your bodybuilding, and that's really when it came out, but we also have to think back to like how food was talked about in our household as children.
Yeah.
Because for me, I know that when I was younger, I was a athlete, was working out 3 times a day, wrestling. That's where my binge eating kind of started. And there was times where my mom would make comments about how much I was eating, or you're going to go eat again. You're going to grab that thing. So it caused me to feel like I needed to hide and go and get food sneakily. So like on Sundays, like I would literally sneak downstairs while my dad was sleeping on the couch, and I would like go into the pantry and get food, and I would go up to my room and hide. So that pattern I still ended up doing as an adult. It wasn't binge eating back then, but it caused me to have some shame, some guilt, and the need to hide having food and just being hungry, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I would do that when I was binge eating. I would like hide in my car. I would hide food under the bed. I would hide food in the trash can. I would go to a different dumpster and throw the food in a different dumpster so Zach wouldn't know. I went to like the most extreme lengths for people not to find. Yeah. And if you're hiding and you're being sneaky, that's a really big cue that you feel some sort of shame and guilt about what you're doing. And it's just wild, because this morning on my YouTube channel, I looked at my video. I have a video of my whole binge eating story up on my YouTube channel, and just watching myself talk about it was just crazy, because some of the links that I would go to hide was wild.
I was single and lived alone during like this worst episode I've ever had. And I think that made it like easier, which made it worse, because it was like the first time I ever lived alone. Like I was very new to living alone. And my whole beginning of living alone, I was in prep. So I had like really, really, really good discipline. And then I realized I don't have anyone looking over my shoulder to tell me not to buy this thing, not to eat this thing, to judge me if I do eat this thing. So it made it like easy to be like, oh, I can do whatever I want.
Because when I go home, then I'm already going to be alone and no one's going to see.
Exactly.
Like even mine would get to the point where I was allowed to go and eat. I wasn't on a diet. I wasn't competing. And I would go and get some things that I liked. And I would literally look around to see if anybody I knew was around.
That's crazy.
So crazy.
It's like, it feels like anyone would notice. Like now I'll go to breakfast and order a stack of pancakes and I will eat it. And that is normal, and no one, like the people around me are also ordering pancakes. But at the time I was like, if I order pancakes and I eat them really fast, they're gonna know that I feel like I'm not in control of this. They're gonna know something's wrong. They're gonna whatever. And then I was definitely extremely self-isolating when dealing with this. One, because it allowed me to get away with it for longer. But also like I knew I really did gain a lot of weight through this period. Again, I was post-show, so like some of that weight was healthy, but then I definitely lost control with how much I was comfortable gaining. I probably gained like 25 pounds in the span of a few months. So I was embarrassed to see my family, because I know that they just went to my bodybuilding show. I didn't want them to see me now in this like completely opposite state, and
I wouldn't even
ask questions.
Go anywhere. Like I literally didn't even want to go to the gym. And we talked about this in a previous episode, but you're right. Like you don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to go to the grocery store. You're just it's not only that you could potentially feel like some sort of shame and guilt around your body, you know, or whatever, if you've gained like a lot of weight or something, but it's this inner guilt and shame that you feel because it's almost like you're walking around as if you have this huge secret that nobody knows. And that's what it really comes down to when you're walking around, is that you're walking around with so much weight on your shoulders and nobody knows.
Yeah. And again, like feeling like I'm not a good personal trainer anymore. I'm not a good coach. I'm not a good like fitness influencer. Like I felt like a fraud in every sense. And if anything, looking objectively now, I feel like it's almost like, not that I wanted to go through that period of my life, but it helps me relate to a lot of my clients who are going through similar. And like, I know you talk about it with your clients very openly, and it allows you to have a different perspective on it. Cause I can be like, I've been there. Here's what helped me. Please talk to me about it. Like it kind of, I remember having a client before having this extreme episode, who had previously told me that she was,
and you didn't know how to respond.
I had never even addressed it with her.
Weird, right?
And I have so much regret with that because she was self-helped, self-recovered, but not for very long. Like she was only a few months into recovery when I started training with her. And like, we would mildly talk about food. I would always try to be like, please tell me what you're not comfortable talking about. Like I tried to respect her boundaries as much as possible, but I had no clue what I was talking about because I had never been there.
Because you can't relate.
You have no clue what it feels like.
There's always this part of me constantly when the little demon in my brain starts talking to me that's like, why does this have to be something that I've struggled with? Why is this... You know, I mean, like even last night, like I could easily just be like, why can't I just be normal? And I've said that to myself so many times, and there's nothing wrong with me. I just happen to have these certain circumstances in my life, and I created this habit that's not so healthy for me. Just as like Zach was a porn addict. He had certain circumstances in life that led him to being a porn addict, then him losing his marriage because of it, and then living alone for a lot of years. And then me and him ended up meeting, you know? So you can easily put yourself, you know, into the victim mindset of like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
But I really wouldn't change it because I love that I do have all this knowledge and I'm able to relate to people that struggle with it because it is such a niche thing. And I'm very happy that I'm able to provide like some sort of support and let people know that I am a competitive bodybuilder. I'm a professional bodybuilder. And I struggled with a binge eating disorder from 15 until 22. That doesn't make sense at all, but I've done it.
Yeah.
And you can too.
Yeah. Because I found it interesting when doing research like for this episode and finding the definition and stuff like that. It is the most common eating disorder, which I didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah. It's the most widespread, the most common.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But no one, like, I feel like I feel like finally people are talking about it, but in the grand scheme, a lot of people don't, especially men. I've always had, anytime I speak on eating disorder or body dysmorphia, so many men reach out.
Yes. It like I'm saying, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. It can literally affect anybody. And I'm also curious, like if there's any research out there, like stats on what kind of industries struggle the most. Cause I'm
sure fitness is up there.
I feel like it's the fitness industry.
I'm sure fitness and entertainment in general, people that need to be on cameras, people who have external pressure to look a certain way.
I think that's the thing, is that anybody that has external pressure to look a certain way.
Yeah. So that's like athletes, that's people on cameras, but that's also, I mean, also just anyone really could and does deal with it.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about a little bit about like what getting help or starting recovery from being in these like unbreakable patterns looked like. For me, I actually started with therapy, and therapy and I have had a weird long relationship where I'll do therapy until I feel okay. And then I'm like, okay, peace out. I'm going to do this on my own now.
This is the thing. It's that we always get help at the very last minute when like shit hits the fan. Therapy's good for when you're good, so that you know, okay, I'm feeling great right now and I have the tools that I need for when inevitably I maybe not feel good, because life is going to go up and down. And after working with multiple coaches throughout my, time, that's the one thing that I always regret, is like not working with somebody year round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I advise it.
Yes. If you can afford therapy, I would just do therapy in general.
There's so many discount codes too on like every living podcast basically for BetterHelp.
Yeah. So that's what I used. I ended up finding a therapist on BetterHelp. I had a few, it wasn't my first time using BetterHelp, but I had, again, once I was fine from my anxiety, I was like, okay, I'm good now. Until I was going through this binge eating and I was like, okay, I need to talk to a professional. Like I am doing research on my own. I'm starting to learn. I read, Brain Over Binge, or I think while I was reading Brain Over Binge, I started with a therapist and he wasn't designated just for like ED therapy. He was just like a general therapist, but he started talking about my childhood and asking what that looked like. And obviously those conversations started coming up with feeling like I couldn't eat in front of people. And when I did go for seconds, it was like, you're really eating again.
Yeah.
Do you
Are
really
you sure
need
you
more?
want
Exactly. And I never ever blame my parents. I just blame how I perceived some of their comments. Like, and my mom was extremely receptive while I was going through this. I would call her after the therapy sessions. I would tell her what we talked about. I obviously didn't place blame because that's not fair to her. She didn't intentionally have any malicious intent or anything. But when I would talk to her about it, she would explain her side and it just made it feel more open and less scary. Yeah. And now I had this like person I could like find comfort talking to about, okay, I'm dealing with this, because at that time I still would only tell my therapist of like, I can't stop this. I don't know what it is. Like I feel crazy, all this stuff. So that was my first step, was just like, again, I feel like rationally thinking about things really helps. Yeah. So just learning about why am I maybe going through this was just a huge like insight and eye-opening to, okay, now I feel like I know how to tackle what to get better.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly. Like logically figuring it out, then actually like doing your own research and finding like good resources and stuff, which we'll link some below, and then getting some like professional help if that's something that you're able to do, are really, really great steps. And that's kind of where mine went. It was like, okay, do I struggle with this thing? Oh my God, that sounds exactly like me. Okay, let me learn a little bit about it. Okay, I'm ready to talk about it. But one of the things too, that if you're not able to get therapy or help, finding someone that's close to you that you can trust. I know that can be very hard and very challenging. Look, I struggled with this for years, and I had dated Zach for like 2 years already, and I never told him. And then finally when I told him, it was very difficult. He had to like pull it out of me. But once I was able to, then it allowed me to be less sneaky and like hide less and be more open about like what I was struggling with. And sometimes now he just knows. Like he just knows. Like the other day I was really struggling with like thoughts, and he just knew, and he didn't have to say anything. Yeah. So finding that one person, the thing is people will be more receptive than you think. And if there are those people that make comments and stuff, because you can definitely curate the people that are around you and how they respond to you by simply just communicating. Like, I appreciate if you don't ask me about food or comment on my weight or how my body looks, or asking me, are you sure you're going to eat that? How much are you going to, like, you can literally tell people to do that. And if they don't respond well, then maybe they're not your people.
Those are the conversations I was having with the people around me, especially my mom. Like, since I felt like she was being so receptive and like taking responsibility again that I wasn't even trying to put on her, I started asking for little things like, okay, I've been embarrassed to visit you because I feel like you're going to comment about my weight when I do. So can we just make it a point? I don't care if I look good. I don't care if I look bad. Just don't say anything about it. Like, just let's not say anything about how I'm looking. And that was like something that she didn't realize that was having an effect on me. I had to tell her. Like, the people around you don't realize asking if you want seconds, asking if they can take your plate, like asking these little things are triggering you. You have to tell them. They can't read your mind.
Especially too with it's, I feel like I always say this, but it's also just like a generational thing. Like, your mom and my mom are around the same age. And was a compliment then to say, oh, you look skinny. Have you lost weight? Or, you know, all of that stuff. Like, it was a compliment. Yeah. But now it's not really a compliment anymore, and it can trigger people in different ways. Yeah. And I totally get that. So for them, I know like they were coming from like a good place. Like, my mom's trying to give me like a compliment, you know? Yeah. And when I was little, I know too that my mom's intention was never to, make me feel guilty about food. She was trying to teach me portion control and listening to your body. Just the ways that she might have said it were just,
we took it a certain way.
We're just different, you know, and it was just so different then.
I think mine comes from like my grandma. So my mom's mom, that generation is even more extreme. That's when like, I think Twiggy is her name, was like the biggest model. Like that was literally what they called her. She was like super, super thin was in. And like my grandma still, she is 90. Her birthday was yesterday.
Wow.
She's 90 now and she'll still tell me how much she weighs. And is like weighs herself every day and is just very obsessed with it. Yeah. So it's like, it's definitely a family thing, a generational thing. And I think it's our job to be the one to speak out about like what is bothering us and try to at least have those conversations. And we're lucky enough to have like very receiving parents. Some aren't.
True.
And
I get that.
If that is something like you either, if you want to keep those people in your life, you need to mentally prepare from when you're seeing them, maybe keeping certain things to yourself about it.
Yeah.
Tuning some sounds out if you don't want to hear it, and just remembering that it's usually not their intent to make you feel a certain way.
Yeah. I would hope not to believe that people are malicious with their intent, like to make you feel bad about yourself. But yeah, just simple conversations like that can really, really, really help.
Let's talk a little more about what helped us. So after that, for me, I think education was my biggest thing. I'm a very logical person. Like if I have the facts in front of me, I will understand it. I will understand like and create a plan on how to get rid of it or fix it or improve it, whatever it is. So education was huge for me. Reading Brain Over Binge, that was like the first insight to relating to someone, which was really nice. And also hearing some like logical thinking about like how our brain works, why this response happens, and some things on like some tools on how to help. Another one for me was the podcast by Dr. Huberman. He did one, I don't know the exact title, but we'll link it below. He did one on binge eating, and literally like I remember doing cardio while listening to it. And he kind of broke down how our dopamine receptors are when we eat food, how that becomes a reward system, all of that. And that too helped me indicate, okay, like I'm using food as like my only source of dopamine. I'm not getting it anywhere else. So obviously I'm latching on to that and like feel like I need it all the time. So those are two really, really good tools that helped me initially. For
me, I thought I put it on here, but I can't find it.
I put your tips all the way at the bottom.
No. They were the resources. There they are, all the way at the bottom. So there's this Facebook group that's really great that I was talking about. It's called Binge Eating, Food Addiction, Emotional Eating Solutions. And there's a podcast that goes along with it. And it's just being able, like I read it on that night that I was really struggling. It's really crazy how the universe works, but I was struggling with like battling myself, and I got a notification on my phone from Facebook that somebody posted in that group. And I was like, of course.
That's crazy.
This is
the universe.
That I never get notifications for.
Yeah.
So I go and I read it, and I'm reading these girls' stories. And that's when I read the story about one of the girls that was wanting to, I don't know. I was reading their stories, but it made me feel so much better. And there's a podcast that goes along with it. So that can definitely help.
I've never looked, but Reddit has like threads for everything. I'm sure there's a support group out there too. So if you don't have someone close to you that you can talk about, talking to people on the internet can be a really good tool. Just be objective with like the resources you're intaking. Make sure they're credible. Make sure they're not gonna trigger you or make things worse. Like things like that. Just mediate the content you're intaking on it. But yeah, groups can definitely help a lot.
Yeah, it just makes you feel less alone.
The next one is mindful eating. And I like how you talk about this all the time too. Because I feel like the tools and things you use are great, so you can add it. But I think just being more mindful for me, like I said, I would like feel not present while I was eating. I would eat in the car. I would eat super fast. I would always be like watching something on my phone. I wasn't even necessarily eating things I was craving. It was just like whatever I could find. So I think just making the little changes to wait until I get home, sit at the table, like not on the couch with the TV on, and actually like pay attention to my portions. Sometimes if I ordered like a really big meal and I know I have this habit of going for like seconds, thirds, like continuously getting up and eating, I would just start with a smaller portion, eat that, sit, wait, like pause for a minute, see if I feel full. If I do, I would try to cut it off. And again, that takes forever. That took me forever to actually like then walk away and put the rest of the food up. But oftentimes I would like go for seconds and then be like, okay, like that was enough for me. Like we're satisfied now. And like kind of just being in tune with, are you actually still hungry or are you bored? Are you mentally just like not present and wanting to eat more? Like,
because
it can look different.
When you're binge eating, you forget what it feels like to be connected to your hunger cues. Because the way that people explain it is almost like they feel like something takes over their body and they can't control. So that's why there's that overwhelmingly full and uncomfortable feeling, because you've eaten so fast, you haven't given your mind or your body any time to catch up to what's happening. And then later you're left with that like, feeling, because you haven't been present while you're eating. You haven't been connected to your body. You've been completely disconnected from your true self. And that's why being mindful when you're eating is so helpful, because sitting there, being with your food, intentional eating instead of just scarfing things down, which is also a pattern from childhood potentially. Like if you have siblings, like not knowing if you're going to have
like
enough food for yourself.
For eating.
Eating when, if you're like me and you live in a Hispanic family and it's like, clear your plate, eating really like, it's just, these things can affect you later on. So being mindful when you're sitting down and checking in with, am I on a scale from 1 to 10, how full am I? 1 being starving, 10 being absolutely full. We never want to be at a 1. We never want to be at a 10. So checking in with yourself, and really something that I've been trying, because I struggle eating slow still till this day. Like very struggle. When I get my food in my brain, I go, I wonder how slow I can eat this meal. I wonder how slow I can.
It makes it more, that dopamine I was talking about, that like reward system, it makes it honestly last longer versus when you're binging, it's like this fast dopamine. It hits you really hard and then you're like, well, now it's over.
I've also been practicing like settling in before I eat, instead of like eating while I'm walking. I'll like go sit down, make sure my drink is full, it's ready. I set the whole scene. I make sure everything is good. And then I'm like, okay, check. But that practice of delaying is so helpful, because we are so automatic and unthinking with binge eating, that practicing delaying it even for a little bit is so helpful. It's like little things that you can do.
It's baby steps.
Another
one for me, food delivery apps, like I said.
Delete them.
When things are easily accessible, you're more often to use them, to do them. So I was definitely the type of person, I was like, first off, I was also spending a ton of money on those things.
It's so much money, man.
That was creating even more guilt and shame, because I was like, I can't believe I just spent $200 this week.
I'm broke and I'm still at the same spot that I wanted.
Exactly. So getting rid of those, that way, at least if you are craving something, if you have this sensation of binging, it is forcing you to, like you said, postponing it by having to drive there, to order it, to grab it, to drive home, like all these things that allow you almost like second chances to pause, to think about what you're doing, or even just think about what you're ordering. Like when you see something on your phone, it's so easy to just like add to cart, check out. When you're in person, like even making healthier choices. Like I remember one of my first steps to improving my binge episodes was making myself binge on healthy things to diminish a little bit of that guilt. Because if I ate a whole pizza in a sitting versus like 200 carrots in one sitting, which I've definitely done, which is not probably good for me. Like that would create a different reaction in my brain. And when you feel less guilt, it's easier to objectively think and be rational with yourself. So I tried making healthier choices while I was binging. And then from there, I was like able to kind of cut down on what the episodes looked like, how much quantity was there, how often they were, all these things. And another thing with that was grocery shopping. I definitely had certain foods where, like the chocolate rice cakes, if I brought them home, I knew while I was buying them at the store, while I was checking out, while I was driving home, that I was going to eat all of them as soon as I got home.
So I think on the way there.
Exactly.
That's true. Like with the grocery, I made a post about this yesterday. With the grocery shopping, just we are very fast-paced humans. So if something is there readily available in our eye view, we are more likely to eat it, to do it, to whatever. That's why there's so many fast food restaurants everywhere. Why do you think that is? Because they
on,
know that we like convenience, we like fast, we like least amount of effort for us available. So if you're having all of these trigger foods around you in the house, of course you're more likely to have an episode because they're just there.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
So certain things that trigger you, don't keep them in the house. Be mindful while grocery shopping. Make a list beforehand. I think that helped me too, because while I was in a good mindset, I could decide what am I going to get, what am I not going to get. And then if I came home and I was like, then in that almost binge mindset where I was like, oh, I wish I got these so I could eat that right now. Oh, but I didn't get them and I don't feel like driving back to the store. Yeah. So it's just that little thing that can help you. Another tip I have is, for me, having people around, because like I said, I was like single, living alone. Rex was the only one judging me, my dog.
He was not. He had no idea.
He had no clue. He probably enjoyed the extra food that I would probably hand him too. But being around people ended up really helping me in the long run, because I noticed I would never binge in front of other people, and I never even felt the sensation to around other people. I think it was like, one, a distraction from it, and two, like watching other people eat normal amounts made me feel like I could eat a normal amount. So that was hard because, like I said, I was embarrassed and I didn't want to be around people. But once I was, and I was like around family and we would go out to eat together, it made it feel more normal to eat certain things where I didn't feel like guilt and shame about it. Like they would be like, oh, let's go get froyo after dinner. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing you can do and it can be fun and you don't have to like cry about it after, you know?
That is true. You can like see other people's healthy habits and like normal eating patterns too, and be like, oh, okay, like I can do it. They can do it.
Yeah. It's helped a lot seeing athletes talk about it and talk about like food as fuel, because that's something I never ever saw.
Yeah, like food is just pleasure for me for such a long time.
Yeah, I viewed it as like, if anything, I have to like withhold this thing from myself, versus like a lot of athletes I follow and listen to are like, oh, of course I ate extra carbs today. Like I have a meat or I have a PR or like something like that. And you're like, just viewing it more as something that can help you achieve something instead of something you have to like get rid of to achieve something is crazy.
That's
so
true.
That was hard for me to get for a while. Another tip I have, and then Julia can share hers, is celebrating the wins. Like I said, even to this day, if I have something that used to trigger me in the house for like a week or two, I'm proud. Like if you are going through these episodes and when you binge eat, you feel guilt and shame, why do you not feel like pride and happiness on the days you don't binge eat? Like it's a thing to celebrate.
And that's really big, especially since we were talking about how challenging it can be to undo a habit that you have created over and over and over again. It's a huge win. You're literally rewiring your brain, and that should be a huge win.
Yeah.
So write them down, like celebrate them. Tell one of your friends, you know, that person that you've reached out to on that Facebook group. People do their wins, where it's like,
I love that.
One lady said that she, I won't go into it, but yeah, like celebrating their wins on it, and they're like so relatable. And I was like, oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, even if it's the tiniest thing of like going one day that you would typically binge without binging, or buying something that used to trigger you and it lasts more than 4 hours that you used to eat it in. Like just those little wins, and they eventually become second nature, and you're like, wow, I buy all these things now, or I go out to eat without feeling this way, and like all these things start to add up, and then before you know it, you're in a much better spot. But you can't really get there unless you're like appreciating the journey of getting better.
Very true. Very true.
Your turn.
My turn. So these are like actual tactical things that you can do in the midst of one of your big binge eating urges. So before I talk about it, what I want to talk about is actually pausing. So one of the reasons why we go immediately to binging is because we are going from the thought or the emotion or the feeling of wanting to binge immediately into action. And in between there's a moment where we can pause in any of these ways that I'm going to explain, but we don't. So what I want you to do whenever you have the urge, because it might come up, it might be at night, it might be when you're alone, use one of these pausing mindfulness practices so that you can take a moment to pause before you make a decision. Because what we're doing is we're doing feeling, emotion, whatever, immediately to action. So let's find a pause. So one of them is, I call it past, present, and future. So I want you to ask yourself, in the past, when I did this, how did I feel? Answer it. Mm-hmm. And then how am I feeling now, which is the present? Emotions, physically, am I lonely? Am I angry? Am I tired? Am I feeling sad? And then lastly, for the future, how will I feel in the future if I don't go through with this? I would feel really proud. I would feel so happy with myself. So that allows you to pause and think about, well, the last time I did this, I thought it was going to help me feel better, but it actually didn't. Yeah. And I didn't feel good. Logic. There we go. Number 2 is Control, Alt, Delete. Control is control your thoughts, your emotions. So get a hold of like, okay, where did this come from? What just happened? Did I get a very upsetting text? Did something go wrong at work? Blah, 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 whatever it is. Alt is altering your thoughts. So something to be more positive, something that you might go and do instead. Like, for example, the way that I used this practice the other night was I had the urge, and then instead of immediately going to the action of binging or ordering DoorDash, I said, okay, well, I'm going to scroll and watch my favorite TikTokers that make me feel really good for 5 minutes and then see how I feel after that. And then after that, I was like, oh, okay, it's gone. Yeah. And that's delete. Either like delete the thought or delete the urge of wanting to binge. So doing that little pausing. So this is good to have like a list of things that you can do to go and pause to help you, which are like an action, is so helpful. This one is so silly, but it very much works. The floor is lava. The urge is coming up, but instead of acting on it immediately, you make a promise to yourself to sit in a space and you pretend the floor is lava and you don't get up for 5 minutes. The reason that this works is because, again, you're sitting on the couch. The immediate reaction is to get up, go and drive somewhere to get food, to go and grab your phone so that you can do DoorDash. If you sit there and you act like the floor is lava and say, I'm not going to get up for 5 minutes, it allows that wave and that urge to crash on the shore, basically.
So dramatic.
So another one that I do is breath work. And that's literally, I want you to imagine that your breath is the urge because it feels so anxious. It feels so heavy inside of you. So you're going to breathe in the urge, hold it at the top for 2 seconds, breathe out the urge, almost as if you're like literally breathing all the emotions that binge eating urge comes with out of your body. Doing that for a couple of breaths over and over and over, it makes you feel so much better, like really fully expanding your stomach and audible breath
It's
out.
making you feel more present in your body too.
Yes. Because usually when you're trying to make that decision of wanting to binge, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with it, a lot of like questioning, a lot of like panic. So connecting back to your breath is very helpful. And then the last one is just a higher perspective. One thing that I like to do is when you're in that space, you start to feel like, will this ever go away? Can I ever get through this? This is going to be my entire life. Having a higher perspective and literally sitting there and imagining your whole life in front of you. From you were born until now, how many moments have passed by in that time? And this moment of you right now struggling and battling yourself is just a speck on that timeline. Mm-hmm. So for that one little moment, it's just a speck. Yeah. In the grand scheme of your whole life and everything that you've done, you've been through, that you've achieved, that you've moved past, this moment that seems so big and scary is just a speck. Mm-hmm. Logic.
And if anything, that speck, like we said earlier, gave us better perspective on a lot of things. Like I feel like you can tailor this addicted feeling to a lot of things in life.
All of these practices work for almost anything. Yeah. Literally almost anything. Yeah. It's crazy. So I literally last night used the Control, Alt, Delete and the floor is lava. I sat on my couch and I said, I am not getting up for 5 minutes until I ride this wave. Because that's the thing, is that the wave will eventually crash. Yeah. We just don't ever allow it to crash because we go immediately from emotion, feeling to action instead of pausing. So I sat there Floor is lava. Control my thoughts. It's okay controlling them. Let's alter my thinking. You get 5 minutes of TikTok of your favorite creators. And then I forgot about the urge. Yeah. It can happen.
I didn't even think about it, but like last week, I remember I was driving home from the gym and I was like, in my brain, I was like, I need to stop. Like I was craving like sweets, like candy. And I was like, I need to stop at Target on my way home. I'm going to grab candy and then go home, which is like, I don't really get guilty for candy anymore because I really love candy. So I'll have it like occasionally, but this was one of those things like I wasn't thinking about it. And I definitely like mindlessly drove to Target and I got there and I was in the aisle and I was literally, then it hit me and I was like, why am I here?
Yeah.
I was like, I have food at home. I have things that I have that are a little healthier than candy that could replicate that like sugar at home. Like, why did I come here? So instead I like went to the book aisle and I was like, I'll buy myself a book, like something I can still look forward to. Yeah. I'm still getting like kind of a dopamine hit, but like it's a better choice for me. And I went home and I ate my normal food and I was like, that was so weird that I like mindlessly did that.
And that's just proof that like sometimes those things are still in there unknowingly, but you were able to catch it when before you would have just mindlessly walked to the candy aisle, checked out, went home, probably ate it all the way on the way home and then be like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
So you were being more present.
More mindful. Yeah, I think being present is like the absolute biggest thing. And it's really hard to create that cycle, like we said, and start with small wins, baby steps, talk to someone, be around people. Like I think it's really easy to forget too. So of course we always talk about like journaling and things like that. Just holding yourself accountable, seeing is the habit breaking? Is it coming back? Identifying it sooner can kind of help you get through it sooner.
There's also a, with that book that you said, Never Binge Again, there's a workbook with it, a Never Binge Again workbook. And it's awesome. I have it and it's literally like a binge eating journal for you to track your progress and how you're feeling. So if you want something that's just like a user guide for you, just get that.
We'll put all the resources below. I definitely think we have a lot of things we could link. Educating and relating to people can definitely help. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, fam.
Okay. Hopefully you are not actively struggling, but if you are, we are here for you. You're not alone. A lot of people deal with it. A huge amount of people deal with it. And hopefully these tips can help you. So we love you all so much. And remember, you are more powerful than you think.
Bye.
Bye.